Have you ever heard of a single idea so powerful it completely rewires a country's economy? I mean, literally changes everything? Well, that is the story of M-PESA in Kenya. And it all kicks off with a view from a helicopter high above Nairobi. So, that quote you're seeing, it's from Safaricom's late CEO, a guy named Bob Collymore. When he first flew over Nairobi back in 2010, he saw one kind of city. But just a few years later, that view was totally different. Something huge had changed on the ground, and it was a change his own company had sparked. And that really brings us to the big question, right? How on earth did one simple service manage to remake not just a company, but an entire country? It's kind of like dropping a single stone into a still pond. You get that first little splash, sure, but then the ripples, they just keep spreading out, getting bigger and changing everything they touch. All right, so let's start with that first stone, that initial spark. You know, the funny thing is, it was never meant to be this huge revolution. Not at all. It started as a really simple, really practical solution to a very common problem. And that solution was called M-PESA. The M is for mobile, of course, and PESA, well, that's the Swahili word for money. So, mobile money. When it launched way back in 2007, the goal was super straightforward. Just be an easy way for people to send money to each other. Now, here's where it gets really clever. The whole thing was revolutionary because it was so simple. You didn't need a bank account. You didn't even need a smartphone. All you needed was a basic, old-school cell phone. The idea was you could send money using a simple text message, and the person on the other end could go to a local agent, like a corner store, and just cash it out. It completely bypassed the whole traditional banking system. Okay, so that's the idea. But what happened next? Well, that simple concept created the first massive ripple. It didn't just make things a little bit easier, it completely rewired the financial world for millions and millions of Kenyans. Just look at these numbers. It's kind of hard to believe, right? Before M-PESA, a huge chunk of the country was unbanked. They were just completely outside the formal financial system. But by 2016, that number tripled. 75% of people were now financially included, pretty much all because of mobile money. It was like flipping a switch and bringing an entire economy into the digital age. So how did they pull this off? Pure, explosive growth. M-PESA built this massive network of agents. Think little kiosks, local shops, just everywhere. This agent network became the biggest distribution network in the entire country. We're talking bigger than any bank, bigger than the post office, reaching into every single remote corner of Kenya. And very quickly, it just became part of life, you know? The first ads were all about that core need, a worker in the city sending money back home to family in a village. But it didn't stop there. Pretty soon, people were using it for everything, paying the electricity bill, buying groceries at the market, getting small loans, even putting money aside for savings. Okay, so the first ripple changed the country. But the story doesn't end there. The next ripple actually washed right back and hit the company that started it all. M-PESA didn't just change Kenya, it completely transformed its creator, Safaricom. And you can hear it right in CEO Bob Collymore's own words. He basically said M-PESA became their lifeline. I mean, think about it. This thing started as a tool just to keep customers from switching mobile networks, but it quickly snowballed into something much, much bigger. This chart really tells the whole story. For a normal phone company, all the money comes from people making calls, right? That's a voice revenue. But look at Safaricom. Their voice revenue was basically flat. So where was the real action? A massive 27% growth in non-voice services. And what was driving that? You guessed it, M-PESA. So get this, by 2016, this thing that started out as a little loyalty project was generating over 20% of the company's entire revenue. It wasn't a side project anymore. It had become the new core of the business. But all that success created a new, kind of massive problem. Safaricom was built like an old-school telephone company, but now it was running one of the biggest digital payment platforms in the world. So that forced the third ripple, maybe the hardest one of all. They had to completely rebuild the company from the inside out. Yeah, they had to go from being a classic telco, slow, with different departments that don't really talk to each other, to being a fast, modern, agile digital company. It was a total mindset shift. Instead of thinking about cell towers and network infrastructure, they had to start thinking entirely about the customer. And this wasn't just some memo they sent around. They made real, deep changes.
In 2013, Collymore literally broke down the old silos and restructured the company around customer groups. Then, in 2015, they did something huge. They moved the M-PESA servers from all the way in Germany to Kenya. That was a game changer because it finally let other developers plug into their system. And they started hiring totally different people: data scientists, bankers, startup folks.
Just like Collymore himself said, that old way of thinking, the telecom mindset, it just wasn't going to cut it anymore. They had to learn how to think and act like a tech startup to get the right people and the right partners on board. And that brings us to the final ripple, the widest one of all. Because once Safaricom opened up its platform, they didn't just build a new business for themselves. They basically laid the foundation for an entire tech industry to grow on top of it. So there's this booming tech scene in Kenya. People call it the Silicon Savannah. All these brilliant entrepreneurs had countless ideas for new businesses. But they all hit the same wall. How do people pay you? There was no easy, reliable digital payment system. M-PESA solved that fundamental problem. It became the payment rails, the financial plumbing for this whole new digital economy. And you can see the results everywhere. Companies like M-Kopa, which lets rural families pay for solar power in tiny daily installments, or Little, a ride-hailing app, a local competitor to Uber. Companies like Sendi and M-Tiba, all of them were only possible because M-PESA was there providing that essential financial plumbing. So, where does all this lead? What's the ultimate result of all these cascading changes? Well, it's a fundamental reinvention of what a company like Safaricom can even be. Bob Collymore's ultimate vision was to transform Safaricom from a pipe company, one that just sells a single service, like phone calls, into a platform company. A platform is different. It provides the core foundation that enables countless other businesses in healthcare and farming and education to build their own services on top of it. When you look at the whole story, it's just incredible. It's a journey from a simple way to send a few shillings home all the way to becoming the digital foundation of a 21st century economy. The story of M-PESA proves how one idea can build a platform that changes a company, a country, and countless lives. And it really just leaves you wondering, what's going to be built on it next?